PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. My game of the day from the Tata Steel Masters round 11 is Fabiano Caruana against Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. And this was a fantastic fight with wild complications. And it started out as a Queen's Gambit declined and an exchange variation. I know a lot of people say to me when I recommend the Queen's Gambit for black, I said, well, maybe it's just a bit too solid and, sometimes it's hard to play for a win with black. Well, if you take a look at this game, then in my experience, this is the kind of thing that happens very often. When I played the QGD as black, honestly, it was really rare that I got sort of very quiet games, often massive complications. So let's take a look. E3. And here is the first surprise from Prag, because he plays bishop d6. Now that is unusual. Normally when there's a bishop on g5, you put the bishop on e7 to break the pin. So that's quite adventurous. I mean, it means that, white is going to think twice about castling kingside, for example, when the bishop is pointing in this direction. But is it an issue that, this pin is unbroken? This is actually a speciality of the US player Jeffrey Xiong, who has reasonable results with this. So, interesting choice from Prag. Trying to, get Fabiano out of his normal patterns. And knight e2. Okay, that means that the f-pawn is ready for action. Maybe f3 and e4, it's possible. Maybe the knight is going to swing to g3. Rook e8, that's of course the best square for the rook in this kind of position. And it makes way for that knight to hop to f8. That can be important. h3. Okay, so still could go kingside. Because, if you go kingside straight away, then watch what happens. We've got a very simple Greek gift. There we go. That bishop can be taken. So h3 means that white can still castle kingside. Knight d7, so the knight is starting its journey. Queen c2. Knight f8. There we are. So the knight safely gets to f8 where it protects the h7 pawn, and you never know, it might come out to one of these squares. Depends how white plays. One option is sometimes after castles to play knight g6 and then h6, and you've kind of forced the bishop into exchanging off here. That's a very typical idea. So castles queenside from Caruana after 19 minutes thought. So we have a real fight on our hands with kings on opposite side of the board. So in this case, as black, you've just got to go for it. If you don't, then white will start with g4, knight g3, maybe knight f5, and the kingside attack starts there. So this is a kind of race. b5. King b1. Yeah, of course, the king should be tucked in the corner away from potentially an open file, and off this diagonal as well. That can be important too. a5. Going for it. Now, it's possible that he should have just held back for a moment and broken this pin, because Caruana had an interesting option to break with e4. This kind of exploits the fact that the bishop isn't on e7. So if pawn takes pawn, knight takes, you can see that this pawn is now a bit exposed. And in fact, it's safe enough to take that pawn. Black doesn't have to do that. In fact, there are kind of mad complications after b4, which I suspect is what Caruana saw and thought, not sure about that. So instead he played f3. with potentially the idea to push. Bishop e7. Okay, so that's a prudent move. And, one can still play g4 or h4 here and start to roll forward. But Caruana, after quite a big think, took on f6. If I were black, I think I'd be quite happy to see that exchange. So this bishop doesn't have an opponent now. It's very nice the knight is on f8, because it means that the king side is really secure. But Caruana's idea in exchanging was to play e4. Of course, he understands it's not good to give up a bishop against a knight, but he realizes that he wants to push forward. And it's just a really double-edged position. So a4, a3 stops this one. Otherwise, the b pawn could march forward, maybe give itself up on b3. But in any case, Pragg goes for it with b4. If you hesitate here, then it'll be White's turn. White will start with e5, f4, and that's a serious steamroller on the king side. You have to try and stir things up. So that is spot on. Good or bad, you just have to do it. And again, feels very natural to push on. It's interesting that if you consult a machine, Stockfish likes bishop e6 here. Also interesting. You never know when that bishop might threaten to pop in on b3, but a3 feels very natural. Now, of course, White has to keep things closed with b3. Pragg played queen b6 here, which seems reasonable looking at those two pawns, but I'm surprised he didn't play a2. One thing is, I doubt whether White should be, keeping the a file open. And if the king goes to a1, I think that's the square we want the king on a black square, basically. You never know when things open up. But he played queen b6 instead. And Caruana took the opportunity to shut things down. That is sensible. Even if it meant that he gave up that pawn on d4, but the king is more secure on a2 than a1. Having said that, I think black's king is more secure than white's here. Nothing has been disturbed on the king side. And, white's king is just a little bit more drafty somehow. b5. So if pawn takes pawn, then bishop takes, and you can see that the discovered attacker on the queen wins material. So bishop d7. Okay, just holding that one. Bishop c4. Attacking the queen. Oh, watch out, there's a skewer, but okay, everything is defended, but still, queen a7 keeps things protected. Pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn. So, after those complications, let's just take stock. In fact, material is still even. This pawn shields the king. So white's king is reasonably secure. I still prefer black's king, although the bishop is on a really nice diagonal here, so f7 could be a target. And there we go, rook f1. So Caruana is fighting back. Rook e7. So takes a break to defend the pawn. Now knight d5 played, which looks very reasonable, throwing the knight in on this lovely outpost. But rook d6 is also a tempting move because it pushes that bishop to a square where maybe it doesn't want to go. If it goes back to e8, it's a bit passive. Bishop b7, that kind of breaks the connection. And then maybe, queen f2 strikes me as a nice move. More pressure here. And white certainly would like an exchange of queens. That means, the king is safe after the exchange. And that pawn is vulnerable. That could be taken. I think white's better in that position, and the rook is really nice and active too. But knight d5 played also looks reasonable, and rook b7. Rook switches across to the queen side. I mean, white has a lot of options here. Fabiano played rook f5. I like that move, queen f2 again. You know, I just want to exchange queens. Maybe I'm just showing I'm a big chicken, basically. But I worry about my king. So I would want to exchange. And if queens aren't exchanged, well, you know, the queen looks reasonable on this spot. And yeah. So anyway, rook f5 played. Rook c8. Okay, looking at the queen. And again, I want to play queen f2. Not that it's, you know, the endgame is terrible for black, but I would just feel more secure with white. Queen d3 played. Knight e6. Okay, watch out. This knight is starting to hop around. Rook f1. Okay, bit of pressure here. Bishop e8. Secure enough. And the rook comes back. Queen b8. So it's subtle manoeuvring at the moment. Rook c2. So Caruana is now sort of shifting onto the defensive. Knight c5. Dangerous. The knight is hopping in. Queen e3. Okay, I'm going to flip the board now. If that doesn't confuse you too much. I'd like you to have a think. How would you play with black in this position? What is black's best move? And this Think and Drink moment is brought to you by Millennium Computers, and I'm very proud to promote their Mephisto Phoenix computer. So have a look at this position, black to play, and I'll see you on the other side with a solution. Cheers. Experience chess in a whole new way with Mephisto Phoenix. Real wood and high quality pieces offer an outstanding playing experience. Thanks to innovative piece recognition and LED move display, you can play more comfortably than ever. Simple setup and intuitive operation. Start immediately from any position. Quick evaluation of your game at a glance. Buy now in the Millennium Shop. PowerPlay viewers can receive a 10% discount on the Mephisto Phoenix computer and indeed all other Millennium products by clicking through on the link and putting in the code PowerPlayMephisto. So do have a look at the Millennium website and see all that they have to offer. Now, what do you want to play in this position? Here is where Pragg broke in. He played knight takes b3. And this is a crusher. It's an absolute haymaker. So if bishop takes, then a simple exchange on c2, rook b2, rook takes bishop, and that king is not long for this world. And it's basically game over. All black's pieces are lined up beautifully. Okay, let me flick it round again, otherwise, just to completely confuse you. So rook b1 played, and excellent follow-up from Pragg, bishop a4. Sporting this one and looking through to the rook. So if bishop takes b3, rook takes rook, and queen b2 mate. So Caruana played bishop d3, and the knight came back. So there's a lot going on in this position. The bishop attacks the rook. This rook is looking down here. The knight is looking at the bishop. So if rook takes, queen takes, rook f2, queen b3, and so on. I mean, it's just a complete collapse. Or rook takes c5, rook b2 check, and queen b2 mate. So Caruana played knight e7 check. Now, don't need to take that. King h8, king is still safe. And rook takes rook. Queen takes rook. Doesn't make any difference. If knight takes rook, bishop takes, and queen b2. So bishop a6 is another pretty random move. Now, there's certainly more than one way to win, but Pragg picked a very calm move. Queen takes e7, and here Caruana resigned. So if bishop takes rook on c2, and black is a whole piece up. And white's king doesn't look too good there on a2 either. So completely convincing final position. Wow, fantastic game. And I just think it was so impressive the way Pragg played. You know, he really went for it right from the opening. So bishop d6, you know, it's an unusual move. And somehow Caruana was just a little bit disturbed. You know, he thought for 19 minutes over castle's queenside. It's sort of a little bit unfamiliar with this position. And it wasn't plain sailing, but Pragg never backed down. That's the important thing. And in the end, he struck with knight takes pawn. Really good stuff. Now, I actually started recording this before the round was over. Gukesh drew today, so he's in the lead with 8. Praggnanandhaa now on 7.5, just a half point behind. Abdusatorov was grinding away against Vincent Keymer, trying to win. If he wins, then he'll be equal with Gukesh. If he draws, then he'll be equal with Pragg. So with 2 rounds to go, it couldn't be closer. It is absolutely wide open. So do join me for the final 2 rounds on Saturday and Sunday. I'll be reporting. Thanks for watching.